So right now, the best method in Texas that most groups are engaged in is the hard work of dedicated volunteers who literally carry around forms to their meetings to help other people get registered to vote and trigger your memory to help you participate. And my goal was to take everybody's supercomputer that's residing in your pocket or on the desk right now and essentially enable us to sign one another up and kind of simplify that process.
In every election cycle, Texas is ranked among the 5 states with the lowest voter turnout. More than 4.5 million voting-age citizens are not registered to vote, and restrictive election laws make improvement difficult. Developers of a website, Register2Vote.org, hope to change that poor registration rate and improve voter turnout. Executive Director Jeremy Smith spoke at a recent EFF Austin meeting where he demonstrated how Register2Vote allows you to complete a voter registration form online. The completed form is mailed to your home where you need only sign the form and drop it in the mail.
I like the idea of speaking to a group that is interested in defending online privacy and civil liberties, digital civil liberties, with a talk about how we can find everyone's name and address on the internet. So this is going to be great.
I may be grilling you.
I'm happy to take any questions. So I'm basically going to give you a quick 5 to 10 minute spiel, and then I'll just open the floor to any and every question imaginable. And so following that, I will give you anybody an answer on any topic you really like on this subject. My goal is to give you some context and the framework and kind of the way we're trying to approach it and make it easier for folks. So kind of the background context on the slide here is just a collection of newspaper articles and reports in the country. Can you guys hear me in the back? Just making sure. All right. Texas is last in voter registration in the country out of every state and DC, and last in turnout. And sometimes we compete for that honor with Mississippi and Idaho. Right now, after this last election, we're going to be 49th. So props to Texas, everybody. Good work. All right. Got
Mississippi people.
One step at a time, right? And so to that end, there's a unique law in Texas that is unlike any other state in the country, which is that if you want to register somebody in Texas with these forms here, would you give me a prop hold up, right? In any other state, you could walk up to someone, give them that form, help them fill it out, and you could go take it to their county for them if they're too busy to turn it in themselves. In Texas, you have to be certified by that person's county every even-numbered year in order to help them fill out a form. And that is a unique law that is left over from a previous era where the state was interested in keeping federal registrars and students from driving down on buses to help register former sharecroppers in Texas. And we just haven't gotten rid of the law. And so it has a pernicious effect of reducing the number of people working on voter registration during political campaigns and other issue advocacy work like EFF from doing organized voter registration by several orders of magnitude compared to places like Florida. So Florida has about half the voting population that Texas does, even though it's the next largest state. And in Florida, they get a roughly 12 to 15 times more voter registrations per year from advocacy groups and everybody else, simply because anyone could help their neighbor, could help their friend or their family member. But in Texas, does anybody here not live in Travis County? Anybody live across the line? So for example, let's pretend I live in Hayes County, or let's say I live in Williamson, but I'm still in Austin, Texas. If I tell you, oh, I'm from Austin, can I register to vote? You would say, sure, not realizing perhaps, unless you checked, am I actually in Travis County because you are deputized in Travis County, presumably not yet Williamson County as well. So in helping me register to vote, you have now committed a felony. You will go to jail for 5 years. The Texas Attorney General has, and you would then lose your right to vote for having committed a federal crime. And so the Texas Attorney General and the governor have been aggressive at trying to root out what they consider to be people fraudulently, going around and vote harvesting. And so it has put a chilling effect on the number of groups in Texas since about 2000. And so as a result, Texas's voter registration rate has just plummeted and the turnout rate has gone pretty much along with it. There's other things that Go along with that, if people perceive a state to be uncompetitive, that affects turnout. You can see here on this graph these are the demographics by racial group in Texas. And the most significant one is that the second largest population in Texas, the Hispanic population, more than a third are actually under the age of 18. And so I think the Asian population is roughly comparable at 28%. And so there's just actually a lot of people in Texas who aren't 18 yet, but who will cross that threshold in the next couple of years, and there will be this massive wave of people who are all of a sudden eligible to vote. So there's a little bit of a skew in the demographics, because if you look at Midwest states or Northeast states, you'll see a lot more of a standard population pyramid. So Texas has some unique challenges, and in particular, a coming burden on the bureaucratic system of 254 counties that have individual trainings that you have to attend one by one to get certified to then help people in that county. They each have to maintain individual records, pay people to process paper forms. Everybody in here has excellent handwriting, I'm sure. Like, you very clearly annotate your address, your name. You notify the county when you get married and change and update your name. I'm sure you all thought to do that. The most common reason for someone's ballot, when you mail in a ballot, to be discounted is that you have changed your last name because you are most likely a woman who got married and were following that norm. As a result, someone will use their Mark 1 eyeball to look at your signature, and they will say, this doesn't look the same, and they throw it in a bin that says do not count, and they don't have to tell you if that happens. And so I doubt many of you, after the 2018 election, I don't want to shame anybody about whether you voted, but just if you did vote, did you think to check online with your county to see whether or not your vote was actually tallied? That's public domain. So there's just a lot of steps in just making sure the process goes off without a hitch that are unclear to almost all of us. And the idea that we should all have to become election experts temporarily for about 1 week every 2 years is kind of inconvenient. So our goal was to try to help reduce this effect by using digital tools. So right now, the best method in Texas that most groups are engaged in is the hard work of dedicated volunteers who literally carry around forms to their meetings to help other people get registered to vote and trigger your memory to help you participate. And my goal was to take everybody's supercomputer that's residing in your pocket or on the desk right now and essentially enable us to sign one another up and kind of simplify that process. So to that end, I came back to Texas in 2018 and brought in an engineer here from Austin to build this website called Register2Vote. We had to go with the number 2 because some guy in Germany owns Register2Vote, and he wants $50,000 for that, and he's had it since 2000, so it's a great market price. We can all tell he's doing very well. But it's okay. We turned it into a gimmick. We're asking each of you to try to register 2 other voters, and we'll be done in a year, so it'd be great. So our insight was that in Texas, there's no online voter registration. We're one of 10 states that doesn't use online voter registration for historic reasons, and people believe that it will enable one political party over the other, even though there are numerous red states that do have online voter registration, and it is vastly cheaper. It's also much easier to check for fraud. It's if you have a clear record where you're not trying to read someone's chicken scratch from a Walmart parking lot on a hot day in July. So what we do is you can sign anybody up on this website. It's mobile optimized. Any volunteer in the state can use it. You can text it to friends. People can put it out on various digital mediums. The form that person fills out is pre-printed onto that standard form there with some, kind of foolproof instructions. A giant finger arrow says sign here. It is mailed out to the voter with a tracking code so we can tell when it reaches them. As soon as the post office says it's arrived in their mailbox, they get an automatic email and text message with a picture of what's in their mailbox and says, hey, be on the lookout for this. This is an official piece of mail. It's not spam. Please, pull it out. All you have to do is sign it and send it back. There's an envelope that's prepaid and pre-addressed to your county already inside. So we never need to see it again. You just take it out, you sign it, you put it back in the prepaid envelope, All of that is an automated process. So from the moment someone types it in to the moment it prints out, gets to the person, goes back to the county, every piece of that is tracked with a barcode. So we know if Jeremy Smith puts his form back in the mail. And that gives us insight onto, did I complete this process? So if someone signed me up very helpfully on their phone, the form comes to me. If I don't mail it back, we can tell, and after a week, you get another prompt with a helpful email and a text message that just says, hey, did we get something wrong? Is there anything we can do to fix that for you? If you just put this back in the mail, you have the choice of voting in November, and it's that easy. So this system took a lot of work to connect the post office, public data records, political groups, advocacy groups, just to use essentially what is a lot of public data, but it immediately checks whether someone is registered to vote as well. So you can essentially encounter somebody, check whether they're registered, get confirmation, have that peace of mind, and then save the state money, save the county's money by not sending a volume of duplicate forms. So we pitched that to the state, the Secretary of State, who actually thought it was so useful to them that they funded half of this this last year, to just on the basis that it saves them so much money and labor by reducing the number of duplications. And so we registered about 150,000 people for less than $50,000 over the last, really just in September and October of 2018. And of that, about 85% of those people voted. So the highest county turnout rate in the state was about 61% here in Travis County. Most of the state was below 50%. But this program worked well enough because there are all these reminders to folks, and we make it easy. We knock down every barrier we can using entirely digital systems to circumvent what are mostly just bureaucratic or negligent, kind of problems that arise for folks. So to that end, we built this because we wanted to help people register their own friends, their own family, their own neighbors, and kind of reduce the interference by third parties. And many of us are very helpful interveners who will walk around and bother you and badger you into registering to vote. But we think it actually works better if people just kind of own it in their own community. So we built this map and deployed it this last year, which is a publicly available map that is free for anyone to use. And it shows you all of these green dots are current people who are unregistered, they're not registered to vote. And that's roughly where I live. It's actually precisely where I live, but we can pan it around. But the idea there is these are individual households that you can zoom into on your phone at any time. You can find exactly who is not registered. And you can go throughout your own neighborhood and help your folks while you're walking the dog, while you're exercising, while you're visiting, attending a house party, chatting with friends, whatever that reason is. You have two tools that make it easy to identify whether someone is registered to vote, just so that we make it a norm in society that this says this is an important thing. Everyone should have the choice, at least, of voting. Because right now, even though we are all citizens, if you're not registered to vote, you don't have the option of voting in an election until you actually fill out this form and send it into the right person and confirm that they processed it on time. If you don't do each of those things, you show up to vote. It doesn't matter how long you've been a citizen. It doesn't matter in what capacity. You won't be allowed to vote. And so it's merely this bureaucratic hurdle that we've accepted kind of in the way. And so with a digital reminder system, we can actually keep track of everyone in the state and try to make sure that they all have that opportunity to vote. So that's what this map functionally does. It works anywhere in Texas. I think I'm off the Wi-Fi at the moment, so you're all just getting the static image version, but I can hotspot it and show you. But right now it's just map.the.vote or a number of other URLs related to that that all point back to the same spot. You can look it up anywhere in Texas, and pretty shortly, in the next month, it'll work anywhere in the country. So we built some scrapers that use the post office's data and an open source data group called Open Addresses to identify every address in the country and then run them through the post office to determine whether they're residential or commercial. We then match those back to publicly available property data and county voter registration data. We pull all that together to screen out everyone who's already registered to vote so we don't bother them, and this gets you straight to the people who are not yet registered. And there's a couple of reasons that might be. They could be a non-citizen. They could be a felon still serving probation now that they're out of prison. It could be that someone has been declared legally mentally incompetent. It could be an Airbnb or other short-term rental, and it could be someone's second or more home that they own. But that's about 20% false positive rate is what that comes to in Texas, and based on our testing over the last year. So about 80% of these dots are actually, and they tend to occur in clusters, of course, are unregistered eligible people in Texas who could vote if given the option. And we think the best people to reach them are their own friends and family and neighbors. So to that end, we made this widely available with the intent that anyone could use it for their own best practices, for their own ideas inside their own community. And our Register to Vote works in about 9 languages right now. And we actually send those forms out in those languages so that we can help folks who have immigrated here and might be citizens now but still struggle with English and might not know why it is that you need to fill out this form. So there's a little explanation that comes from someone in their own language, sometimes with videos that we've been filming to give to folks so they kind of understand what's going on. To that end, our plan is to expand this map and increase its functionality, add some gamification layers. You sign in with a single email authentication. That's just so we can track to make sure that there aren't malicious actors claiming to have registered 10,000 people a minute in a particular ethnic area. Ever since we built both of these websites in the summer, we have been under siege from foreign servers, along with every other voter registration group in the country. Vote.org and TurboVote both had their websites taken down, all of their domains destroyed, much of their database sets ruined. We were very fortunate to be already under Cloudflare at that time and not that important. So we managed to kind of hold up over the past year. But there's just a number of problems with operating in the 501c3 or C4 space right now with cybersecurity. There's just a number of groups that are kind of taken a shining to picking us apart. So we use commercial grade defense right now. The biggest expense of this map is the cybersecurity suite. The rest of it's less than $100 a month. So. But yeah, so that map, we're making it widely available. We have gamification. We keep track of what everybody's doing, award badges and points, and we'll have a little leaderboard that lets you know how close you are to your neighbors and everything else, and kind of implement this more widely and share it amongst other groups. And it's got a couple of open public APIs so people can pull that information for other types of charities who are working in this space to enable them to work with the latest data. And so it's constantly pulling from whatever is publicly available from counties, states, and commercial vendors, and then other people are putting that information back in as they register them to vote in whatever modality they use. So you have groups who do it by mail, groups that do it in person, groups who do it in online in various forms. These people print their PDF and send it in, and we pull all of that together to show you what the latest status is. And these actually change colors as you interact with them or as someone takes an action anywhere on our ecosystem. And the goal is just to be that kind of clearinghouse of coordination using entirely open source coding and volunteer developers. So we built this with the intent to make it easy for anyone else with a good idea to take it away and run a really great program and just make those data sets public. So to that end, we're going to keep working on this and expanding it across the country, working with partner groups. And we encourage everyone to try it out in your own neighborhood and creep out your neighbors by being like, you're just a dot on my map and I'm supposed to come here. I don't know. And of course, defending everybody's online privacy. We don't put any names on it. We don't put anybody, we try not to make it scrapable in that regard. And we only show a limited data set at a time, depending on where you're looking, so that no one can harvest everyone's address in some sort of malicious way, even though all those addresses, they're literally public data. So does anybody have any questions? I'll be glad to go ahead.
How are you funded?
So mostly I paid for it from savings from the Army, and we had a few folks near the end of the election come in to say, I'd like to do a specific program in Dallas, and we were happy to accommodate that. But it is a 501c4, and depending on our needs, we might take a little bit more funding from some like institutional grants, or there's a couple of folks in Austin who've been very generously giving $5 a month, and we're happy to report you get 10 voters for every $5. So very low overhead when you don't pay people for labor. Yes.
I'm curious, where did the majority of your DDoS attacks originate from?
So
I have a guess,
yeah,
but I'd like to hear you say it.
Yeah, the servers are mostly in three particular regions. The one you might be most surprised about is Germany. The second one is the Middle East, which has large-scale criminal networks that are available for sale, and the third one is from the Russian Federation. And so they've been very friendly.
I mean, two of those make a lot of sense. Do you have theories on why Germany is so popular?
Germany has a number of tech companies that have easily accessible server farms, and somebody misuses those. I'm pretty sure that's probably what it's limited to. I think they're called like Stasi.internet or something. So that's an old Eastern European joke for those of you who know your Cold War history. Please.
What scraping technology do you use?
Selenium, mostly, and that's just because the young woman who built it was very gifted in that particular language and very experienced. And I would have to ask our technical director if we're running anything else, but I'm pretty sure the Selenium script is what's doing the bulk of the work on the post office's website.
Do you know what language bindings?
I don't. We've gone through 3 iterations, and I'm not entirely sure at this moment, only because we've just now been upgrading. And that's an easy one, though. She wasn't able to be here tonight because she's having surgery, but our senior engineer is a very talented, longtime member of this community, and so if y'all know Madeline Eden, she's very, very good at this. And
John can probably pull a view source on us if we're really curious.
Yeah. It literally, I don't mind either. This is designed to be something that the community can improve and take to a new level. So
Do you have repos up?
we do. We have public repos up. And
GitHub, I assume?
Yep, we do. And so this aspect of the map is totally freely available, and we're happy for people to use it in any way and kind of improve upon it. And we have a large Slack channel full of volunteers who take a crack at particular projects and build out features on a volunteer basis. So, Russ.
Integrating with property and county tax records, that's right. A lot of different sites, I assume?
It's a lot of different sites, and they change very haphazardly. You could not tell me what is different about some of those pages, but they get broken very easily. But it's just a lot of manual work that we check. We run a function that checks to see if the scraping is working correctly, and when it flags an issue, we go to that page and hunt around and figure out what they'd move to a different page. And it's 254 counties in Texas, then you have parishes in Louisiana and commonwealths in Virginia, and it gets more complex. There's also things that are fun, like Austin the city is not in Austin the county, and Houston the city is not in Houston the county, but I guarantee you all of your autofills would try to put the wrong county into this right now. Or my favorite one, county, most people write USA, doesn't really get you to completion. So we have some automatic corrections to that prevent those errors. If anybody puts Austin City in Austin County, we don't even bother telling them they got it wrong. We just go ahead and fix it on the back end. Yeah.
I apologize, I walked in late, so I didn't hear you talk about the source of your voter information. I assume you're using publicly available.
The publicly available files from the counties themselves and the Secretary of State.
Are you cleaning those in any way?
We are cleaning the heck out of them. So we dedupe them, and we standardize the addresses, and then we standardize the property addresses, none of which has any rhyme or reason to the way it's done. And that took us a lot of effort to improve over a course of 7 months. Then we put all of that together, we run match rates, we look at the post office has what's called a national change of address registry. So if any of you recall moving recently, you filled out a change of address confirmation, most likely, if you wanted to have your mail forwarded to you. If you didn't know you could do that, it's very useful. Also, it gives me great data, so please do. and then that alerts us when people move to Texas. And so we will keep track of, also when county, property sales occur, we flag that, and then we go and look and see, did Jeremy Smith move out of his home? And we're gonna put that back on the map now, and we're gonna put his new address on the map, because now, 2 different subsets of people need to get registered at new addresses. So yeah, and we're always looking for better commercial data about who lives where. Coke is perfectly happy to sell Coca-Cola to anybody regardless of address. So a lot of the big entities like Google and Facebook actually don't have great fidelity on where precisely people live right now. They have a good idea of what zip code, what precinct or whatnot you might live in. But it's really hard to get good information about where people live. Even registered voter data is only accurate about 85% of the time. Go ahead.
You mentioned something that I wasn't previously aware of, which is that you can look up whether or not your vote was actually tabulated.
Yes.
Is there any recourse for finding out that?
Sure isn't. You certainly missed your chance. Before the election occurs, you can go in person and you can essentially contest why your vote wasn't counted.
So if you early vote, you can contest.
That's right. If you tried to do it on the day of, you wouldn't have time to find out that it wasn't going to be counted. If you vote by mail in advance, if you're like over 65 or going to be out of town, or if you early vote and then you find out it wasn't, you can check online, you can see it's not reported, then you can go back to that county, you can call them and verify that your vote has been taken in. And if not, they have to tell you why. But if after the fact, they still have to tell you why, but it's too late.
So you can't pull together like a class action lawsuit of a bunch of people that were discounted?
You could if it was a clear reason. Yeah, if you had enough people, you definitely could. We're looking into things like that. So right now we're working with the UT Journalism School with all of their master's students in the data journalism class to do FOIA requests. So we're going to FOIA every county in the state for why people were either prevented from registering or prevented from voting, and we're going to look for patterns in each of those counties. Because it turns out, I falsely assumed that political parties and other groups must of course be watching because you want to make sure you're in a fair fight. None of them, Republicans nor Democrats or anybody else, is ever looking, and so I find that crazy. So we're going to look for them, and we're going to make a public data set that shows you, here's all the people who were deleted from the voter rolls.
Could you, do you know off the top of your head, at least for those of us in Austin, what the website to check if your vote was counted was?
It's called Vote Travis, and I can hotspot myself in and demonstrate to you all. But you essentially, no matter where you are in the country, you search, X county elections, whatever that is, and that will always get you to the right place. You go in there, and somewhere in a very bad UI, you will find access to a place to search. And so you can find out whether your vote was actually counted for every election. And you might be surprised to find out it's not. The reason I got into all of this, I was deployed in 2012, tried to vote by absentee, and I'm from Texas, and I voted in 2008, but I didn't vote in 2010. It turned out I'd been deleted for unknown reasons, and they told me I wasn't allowed to vote, and I was like, I guess I did something wrong. I come to find that it's actually just sometimes my name is extremely common, Jeremy Smith. There's other people named Jeremy Smith who with my exact middle name here in this county, and maybe one of them committed a felony. Maybe my mail was forwarded to me overseas, so maybe they thought that I wasn't here anymore. But even though I was in the military deployed, there was no recourse because of the deadline. So, yes.
Can you use the same methods to look at whether people have voted in the past and use that sort of information, say this is a high value person because he's not registered?
Yep, you sure can. That's like the most common way that you would be contacted by political parties during primaries, especially, is like if you've done it before. But anybody in this room could go request and get access to the voting history of every person in Texas and every person in the country, really.
But you're not integrating that into...
We aren't showing that in that regard, largely because unregistered people don't have a voting history attached to them. Even if we could find a commercial record for me, let's say I'm not registered to vote, there would be no ID number to match to in the state's file for a voting record of voting in other states. Does that make sense? So we'd have to find a commercial record of me in another state or somewhere else where I had previously voted, and then you could figure something out like that. So I am looking for those sorts of needles, and sometimes we're able to get hits, mostly if someone has a pretty unique name. It gets very difficult to try to figure out exactly who is in a house if they aren't registered to vote, if they don't own property, that sort of thing. Does that make sense?
Why don't people vote?
Number of reasons. No, I mean it's a fair question. Pew has done incredible research on this topic, and it's all publicly available. So the number one reason that people give is that they don't think it matters. They don't. The second thing, which is distinct from the not mattering, is like their vote can't affect the change. The second thing is that they don't perceive that the government or people who are in elected office represent them or would listen to them anyway. The third thing is they didn't know there was election. They don't know how. They were embarrassed and intimidated when they went there, and somebody said, they acted like that person was an idiot for not knowing how to do the like weird little dial thing, the like rotary phone voting method we have here in Travis County. They felt like belittled or whatever. They were prevented. That's the fourth largest reason. So in 2016, it was like 2.5 million people tried to vote in various places in the country and were turned away for not being registered, for not, having been dropped off the rolls, for having moved and not updated their address, whatever the reason. They didn't have ID and they couldn't come back. So those are really the four big categories. By far the largest and the second largest are not believing that the whole thing works for them. And that's just a Yeah, I want to say it's more like 55 to 60% of those is those two categories together. And they've done there's a lot of delineations inside those Pew studies and other studies that show the specific phrases people use, like a word cloud style. And it's very telling that there's a sense of that, like, this stuff doesn't work for them. And that's part of like, the idea behind this is we shouldn't have to rely on someone who begins running a year from now, has to win a nomination, hire up staff, come out and try to talk to 500,000 of us to get our vote for Congress, when we have friends and neighbors and community members who are better informed. There's groups like this where people attend weekly or monthly or whatever to essentially stay informed on topics. Those are actually better communities of like-minded individuals with similar values that are better for approaching for these sorts of things. And so this is designed to help groups like that kind of, if they want to articulate their actions through voting. Does that make sense? Amy?
Good article you can Google about San Antonio area voters who are lower socioeconomic minority and how they just think their vote doesn't matter. And I was proud, not really. What turned it around in many cases was a younger, enthusiastic family member going and begging them to vote, like, do it for me, please do it for me.
Yep.
And so that's out there. If you just, like, San Antonio, there's a good write-up on San Antonio.
It seems like, so in chemistry, there's an activation energy.
Exactly. Yep.
And a catalyst will lower that activation energy so
Yep.
you can get it over the hump.
That's exactly right. So a catalyst is most often someone you already respect or admire in your own social circle who votes. The simplest link to getting someone to vote is if they know someone who votes. So you tend to see clusters of people and everyone in them votes. And then over here are clusters of people and no one in them votes. And like what changes those non-voting circles is when one member starts and just expresses that they thought it mattered to them. Or there's other simple messages like, there's this thing where if you tell people, oh, really high turnout, everyone is voting, more people will go vote. It becomes like a social norm effect of like, well, I'd be embarrassed not to now, So there's an effect that we measure, that we see, and then every campaign bombards people with that message to the point where it becomes, no longer has a substantial outcome. But people are looking for those catalysts. What is it that moves people? So the biggest thing that's attributed in this last election to the 50% growth in the 18 to 24-year-old vote is the Parkland shooting and the March for Our Lives group. The number one cited reason for people under 24 to have voted now is gun control. And that is a stark change. It has not been anywhere in the top 5 in any prior year.
I heard there was some legislation on the docket, or maybe may have been passed by now by the new House, that they were wanting to revamp voter registration in addition to a whole lot of voter suppression things. But do you have any faith that that's going to go anywhere? Or is that kind of like dead legislation?
Are you talking about the federal house or the state house?
The House, I think the federal House, they talked
Yeah,
about
because I was about to say state literally started today. So.
They both, so federal house started on yesterday, right? And today was, so to that end, there are a number of bills at the federal level for improving voting rights, mostly designed around fixing the holes from the now broken Voting Rights Act, which was started in 1965 and sort of died in 2013. In addition, expanding things like online voter registration and automatic voter registration, which you mentioned. It's very unlikely that that goes very far because we have divided government, and right now there's a partisan argument over whether or not more voter registration is good for one party or not. So there are some studies that show that Democrats get a bump, albeit a small one, from improved access to voter registration, and there are some studies that show kind of no effect. And so, depending on which side you are, the Democrats are arguing it's the no effect studies, obviously, and the Republicans are arguing it's the Democratic studies, that are right. So you have this odd case where they're advocating that this is good for the other side, sort of thing. In the state house, there's a number of bills. So there's an effort to expand access to vote by mail. There's the effort to pass online voter registration. There's the effort to reduce or increase the number of forms of ID that would allow someone to vote, so to include student ID. There's broad agreement on all of them between Republicans and Democrats right now, supposedly, other than online voter registration. So, and Governor Abbott has stated unequivocally that he will veto any online voter registration or improvements to voter registration that comes across his desk. If he holds to that, then it likely wouldn't go anywhere. But there are a number of Republicans, both on the bureaucratic executive side and in the legislature, who think it would save the state a lot of money. It would also make it much easier to catch fraud if people were committing it, if we had, a computer to run that check. Much harder to do with 21.5 million paper records. So
I can also say off the top of my head, I don't know if there's a specific bill they're supporting. I'd have to check, but there is an advocacy group also called Citizens for Voter Choice. They're specifically working on trying to get the legislature to eventually introduce and pass a bill that would basically create a petition gathering system for signatures, the main goal of which being that currently it is incredibly difficult for third parties to get on the ballot in Texas because it's a 50,000 signature threshold. They're wanting to try to get an online system created so that the Libertarians and Greens and other parties can get on the ballot much easier. So that's also a thing that is going on.
So you would see in that case, though, like both parties probably wouldn't support it.
Oh, yeah. Hate that idea.
There are some things that bring all Americans together, like stepping on the neck of anybody else. No. That's
so I guess I have two questions. One of the issues with, with registering voters and party affiliation is like right now, like I have van access, so I can see if someone in Texas.
This is the Democratic database CRM tool.
So I can see if someone has voted in a Democratic primary, if they voted within the state of Texas.
That's correct.
But I cannot see if they are someone who's moved to Texas from somewhere else where they had a primary affiliation.
Yeah. It's in the same CRM. It goes back to the database you're referring to. So that this is the really advanced world of data machines in politics. They're all using a 2004 era database that hasn't been upgraded. It's a CRM tool where the UX was designed in 2004, and they really have not updated it.
Quite bad then.
Yeah, it was bad. It was revolutionary but bad, right, at the time.
I can tell you all government systems are on an average of 10 to 15 years out.
So to that end, the CRM has that for every state. But for whatever reason, they decided that the way they needed to build this was to get an individual contract with each state party, and to have a different database, a different table, with the records for those people in that one, and only accessible inside of that geofence, which means that if you move from Oklahoma as a registered Democrat to Texas, where we don't register by party, the people in Texas can't see it, but the people in Oklahoma sure can. And we can see every Texan who moves to other states. there's like very little chance of that being fixed more broadly. All of that's publicly available data. There's this effort right now underway. Reid Hoffman has been funding an effort to build a data trust, which is meant to unify these things and then deliver it back to everybody. But the state parties would then get less money that then they could sell off, and so they're opposed, even though it would give them better data and make all of their volunteers and activists better informed and better able to actually connect with people and get the votes to win for their party. But the party would make less money, so obviously we can't do that. So long-standing problems. And it's mostly an issue of all of the people in charge of each party are above 70 and 80. And they don't, anybody who works on the engineering team reports to somebody who works on the fundraising team, almost exclusively. And so the priorities of both organizations are fundraising, always. And then below fundraising is the communications team, right? And so then the communications team below that is the field talk to voters, to engage people team, and then under that is the tech people. And so you can see how the priorities for planning the architecture are very well stacked together.
And then the other question's more about your thing. Have you thought about adding in some questions in order to target people for absentee ballots?
Yes, so we already have a hidden click-through. When people are over 65, it will automatically ask them. So college students is a harder problem. If you register a college student to vote, right, they're allowed to vote in either their hometown or where they currently reside. This is true if you're working abroad or if you're living away from home. Everyone's free to decide where your residency lives, and there's actually no residency real challenges out there. We could all decide to live in Montana tomorrow, and technically we could all register to vote there. It would not be hard. But they're very unlikely to vote if we're asking them to mail it back home. They're highly likely to vote if we ask them to vote where they are, because what happens is you talk to them now, then they go about their life, and college is full of things where voter registration and voting is very important. It's critically important. Everybody talks about it at the parties. The boys and girls get together and they talk about voting. They're very clear-headed on this, right? So when it comes time to vote, they've totally forgotten and they're wandering around. And if there's a place that says vote here right now, it takes 2 minutes, they're like, meh, like I'll go ahead and I'll vote there. But otherwise, you see a 20% drop off if you're asking them to mail it back. It's still sometimes a good option, and so it can be worth doing, but it kind of results in lower turnout compared to registering them at their current location. So it's tricky, and so there's a lot of decision making there. So part of that is how to communicate that to someone, to say like, you kind of have this option. It's convoluted. If you do A, it's good for kind of us, for the idea of promoting democracy. If you do B, because like you think you're going to move back home, you'll probably forget later. Please don't choose B. But it's kind of not. But it is their choice. But it doesn't do it automatically because there's no way to know that someone is a college student per se from our current flow. So it would require another click, and we could potentially look at that. But that part's already built, and it's automatic.
So in the first two buckets of why people don't vote, of I think it doesn't matter, and what was the second one?
They don't believe the people in charge would listen to them anyway.
Gotcha. Assuming 55% of these dots
feel that
fall
way
into those categories,
right?
What do you consider a win for this? It's like if you can reduce the number of dots on this map by 30%, is that good? Is reducing it by 80%? Is it reducing it by 10%?
Reducing it by 10% would be the best program that's ever been run in the history of the country. Like better than the federal registrars going down during Reconstruction, better than post-Jim Crow Freedom Riders. Because despite all the Freedom Rider efforts, right, like Alabama and Mississippi haven't really changed their particular, who they're electing. And so 10% would be an enormous gain. That would be incredible. I would love to see that number. 30% is probably the ceiling. Like, say again?
Is that just is that just not going after the 55%, going after some other?
It's partly
who are just like don't know it's voting.
That could be the case, right? And if we could strategically know how people felt before we talked to them, we would probably prioritize in that order. But we don't know how to tell yet. Does that make sense? Now, there's a piece here that we eventually want to append. There's a company here in Austin called People Pattern. It's like on Peter Nallis. That is a really good social media commercial marketing company. And they can tell from everybody's tweets and Facebook posts and online behavior what your top issues are and which way you lean and how much money you make and all kinds of stuff. And they sell that to commercial companies to try to target you for coffee ads and sneakers and other crap. But it would actually just be useful to know what people are talking about, not to try and predict how they're going to vote, but instead to try to talk to them about like, hey, it turns out you really care about internet privacy and digital civil liberties. Like, but that's a very precise, application. So what we would like to do is build out the social graph of kind of who knows who and append those social media records from the like Twitter handles and other things. And then a group like this, we could give you 500 targets in Austin who are essentially aligned with the mission of this organization. And many of you probably already know those people. And so you could partition them. And we ran a pilot study in West Houston that took 300 people from Hindu temples, Jewish synagogues, a number of other religions and groups, and brought them together, and we printed out binders, just rosters of people who were Tagalog speakers from the local area or lists of citizens of one demographic or another, and they would go through and they would highlight the ones they knew manually. And from those 300 people, we had about 12,000 successful conversations between them to their friends that they already knew, and 10,000 of them committed to voting for the candidate of their choice, which is one of the most successful programs we've ever run, had a very high turnout rate. So we're looking at automating that process. That's what I work on separately at BlueSquad, which is the progressive political tech company that we're standing up. But we're basically trying to connect all of that so you can identify people you already know and help them get registered to vote.
You can take the Register to Vote app for a test drive by going to register2vote.org. You can hear more of Jeremy's question and answer session by going to our YouTube channel. Just click on the YouTube tab at the top of the Plutopia.io webpage. With John Lebkowski, I'm Scoop Sweeney, and this is the Plutopia News Network, 20 minutes into the future.